All right, we are rolling back on the air. CommonSenseOhioShow.com. Not your ordinary show, though. Still, nonetheless, brought to you by Harper Plus Accounting. Check out all our content on Harper Plus Accounting, and you can figure out why you should also use Harper Plus Accounting for your accounting needs. Small business, just a little guy, one tax return a year type person. Doesn't make any difference. They got the resources for you. And obviously, you can check out our content at CommonSenseOhioShow.com because you wouldn't be the only one. We have a listener, Belinda, who has done just that, and she had sent a topic. So those who have listened regularly, thank you, by the way. But we always ask if you have topics that you want us to cover, if you have things that you want us to talk about, if you have a question you want us to try to answer. We don't profess to know everything, but we do profess to making our best effort to put a common sense approach on various topics, both political, social, economic, whatever the situation would be. And Belinda, a regular listener, I'm pulling it up right now. We're going to read her question. First of all, we'll skip to the end because I sincerely thank you, Belinda, for your comments here, and they were most generous. She talks about her people and the people that she trusts to provide information, and she puts us in that group of people. I'm very humbled by that because, who are we to earn that moniker?
Yeah, quite frankly, but thank you. Yeah,
thank you very much, Steve, Norm, Brett. She writes, "You are also my people, and I enjoy hearing you speak on all your various topics. You speak from the heart, and when you do not agree with each other, you give us food for thought. Do not underestimate how valuable your podcasts are." And, thank you, obviously. Belinda, this hits home for us because, as we come down here every week and do the show, Norm particularly, you put a lot of time into this thing, researching the news stories. I know, Brett, you do the same, and I do the same. And it's not like we're making money, millions of dollars hand over fist to do this. We do this pro bono in my legal profession. That means for the good of the people, and we do it because we enjoy having these discussions. I think it's intellect. I get something from it, of course, but we try to share something with it as well.
I learn from you guys.
Yeah,
and same here. Yeah.
And so, Belinda, thank you. That's such kind words, and we are all at the table humbled by this. But back to your question, which is really sort of. And I will confess, I spent the better part, we got this question earlier in the week, and I spent several days actually pondering it. And I didn't know how to answer it at first, and Norm, you had a nice response to her in writing that we'll get to, but something dawned on me when I was interviewing somebody else in another show this week, but we'll get to it. She says, "I would love to hear a talk about American idols. Historically, who did Americans idolize? Or perhaps, more appropriately, who do we hold in high regard and love and respect? Today, there is dysfunctional idolization of the Kardashians. What did they do to deserve to be treated like national treasures? I heard someone say once they're America's royalty." What? I will not take your time to get on my soapbox about that one. But what is the purpose of pulling the media strings to make us believe that we must wait with bated breath to know what the last loving glance between Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce occurred? Is it a psyop to garner votes for Biden from a certain demographic or to distract us from what matters? As an aside, because, and I won't go into the next, but it is sort of thought-provoking, right?
Yeah.
Like, who are the American idols? And we're not talking about the TV show, obviously, but we're talking about the people who are idolized either in social media or in the media or generally speaking. Like, who do we worship as our role models, maybe, is really what she's talking about. It's like, and she points out rather sarcastically here that the Kardashians are hardly role models, yet they are the people, like we follow with bated breath what these people are doing.
Yeah.
So it intrigued me, this question, because, and then I think she asked historically, who are the American idols that our grandparents rather, or even maybe their grandparents would have looked up to. And I have some thoughts on it, but I will turn over the forum to you guys first.
I kind of wonder if the role model concept is fairly new. Did people have role models back in 1776?
Well, I think
you know what I mean? Early America.
I think they had role models, but I think the pool of those who could be role models was a much smaller pool because they didn't have social media. They didn't have this.
It was kind of your circle of people around you,
or maybe a president traveling by train on campaign, or a political figure riding through. Might have been. I heard stories. It's great. I didn't think about this because there's like George Washington after he turned down the offer to be king. sort of enjoyed riding the countryside as a surveyor, and he would knock on doors and stay with people, and like it'd be like Airbnb except they were still there. He would stay with people, so he was a role model, I think, for people. And if he weren't, they wouldn't have let him stay there. It's like, who the heck are you? But he at some point became famous enough where people were comfortable having George Washington sort of alone knock on their door and say, "Hey, you mind if I hang out for a few nights while I travel?" And they said yes. And, that was without Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, 24/7 CNN. I mean, we didn't even have 24/7 news when we were kids.
No.
We had to listen to the national anthem at 12 at midnight.
And I guess because I was thinking about this too. It's like, who was my role model? And then I got to thinking about, why are the Kardashians role models? I mean, is it the lacking of that person who thinks they're the role model of their life, not having one in their own circle of their family? I mean, my role model was my dad.
Right. Are we so disconnected from
our
again,
I didn't put him on a
circle.
pedestal. I just learned so much from him, and I think we all can say that about her. And I think we should. You look in your family, and maybe a role model wasn't truly the what the phrase is, but it's that. But I think that fits that definition. Every time I do something, I think about, in regards to what he was good at, I think about, Dad, how would you tell me to do this?
Yeah. What would you say, Dad?
Yeah.
This question opens up so many cans of worms. Today's youth seem to be obsessed with celebrity culture, to the point that there are these influencers and there are these people that live out their lives with a live camera on them 24/7, showing every activity that they do. If if they're cleansing their face because they have pimples, or if they're eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch, there is this drive now that's almost culture-wide to be famous, to be somebody.
There's money in being an influencer as a YouTuber. I mean, people, that's going to be their career.
It's become a thing where
like this Hawk Tui girl, right? It's like this,
right.
Who is she?
Right.
Spring Factory. Now she's on.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's going to be a shooting star, and she's a role model for a few weeks, and I think people are already sick of it.
Yeah. Right.
And you just but what it sort of says, so this is a way of coming back behind Belinda's question a little bit, is that not only maybe do we have many of the wrong idols and heroes selected for all the wrong reasons, but we have a rush of people who now want to be those heroes and want to be those idols, right?
Yeah, so things have really changed in that regard.
And many of them have accomplished, like the Kardashians,
Nothing.
At
least nothing of importance.
Of importance, right?
Yeah, and that's a very good point, that they're raising their hand to be a role model.
To be a role model.
Right, me.
Wow.
Yeah, look at me. It's a very narcissistic.
Narcissistic.
So as I gave this thought, I was interviewing a guy who owns a local firearms shop, and we were talking about sort of the lack of. He's busy these days because he's selling a lot of guns. And he's also a police officer, but he's selling a lot of guns because people are worried that they're not feeling safe on the streets.
Yeah.
All right. So people are, and whether that's true or not, that's the feeling.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking. There was an era back in the late 60s where we sort of had similar policies in place in our country. About, I guess it resulted in some chaos, I will say. Crime in New York was out of control. Crime in San Francisco and LA. I mean, it was all out of control. And then that sort of created this backlash that came along in the 70s and 80s for law and order.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me during that conversation that the role model, like one of the movie characters, the people I was looking at back in the late 70s, and I was born in 1970, so I was still pretty young, but it would have been the one that came to me like that was Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry.
Yeah, for sure.
And he was this backlash of the highest order of this.
They called him an anti-hero.
Right.
Because he definitely wasn't a sweet, nice.
No.
I mean,
right.
he was
still.
He was addressing violence with counter-violence.
With counter-violence
Right.
as a backlash to this free-for-all crime defund.
As opposed to, right, like go the generation before, Gary Cooper in High Noon.
Right.
If you want to look at pop culture. In that movie, he went around trying to get the citizens of this little town, right,
Yeah.
to back him up because he's the only law enforcement officer in that little town, and the bad guy's coming on a train
Yep.
to kill him.
Yep. And,
Right.
And
they all flake. In the final analysis,
he's standing alone.
It's just him.
And what's interesting about Clint Eastwood and some of the predecessors you brought up, I think, Brett, you and I talked about this the other day.
John Wayne.
Yeah, John Wayne
yeah.
apparently would not work with Eastwood and criticized Eastwood because he believed that Eastwood's portrayal of that figure was wrong. That the people in the West deserve better in that time frame or whatever it was.
He wasn't into anti-heroes.
He was not into anti-heroes. He was into the patriotic thing. So the generation before Eastwood had a different role model.
Right.
You know, it would have been the John Wayne, the self-sacrifice. Like
Sands of Iwo Jima.
Yeah. And some of that was propaganda
Even
coming
the
out of
first
Hollywood.
astronauts.
Yeah.
They became role models.
They became role models.
They put their lives on the line.
Absolutely.
So this doesn't answer the question.
Yeah.
Space cowboys.
That's
what the astronauts were.
Yeah.
They were the latter-day cowboys.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
they became role models, right?
That's right.
I had lunch boxes with spacemen on them.
Oh, absolutely.
And so really that this doesn't answer the question. And as I thought about this, it really doesn't answer the question. And I'm not sure the question has an answer other than to say this. I think our role models reflect the culture.
For sure.
So the role, and they're not our role models. They're the people who get elevated to this place. They reflect the culture or where the culture is going. And the Kardashians, when they emerged and saying, what was that, like the 2000s ish?
Yeah, I guess.
Right.
Maybe a little later. When they emerged, there was like this free for all, do what you want, kids go party and have fun, and life was sort of good. It was before the 2008 collapse.
It was driven a lot by Bruce Jenner marrying the mother.
Yeah.
Right? And then,
and then you had Britney Spears in the news with Paris Hilton in the news and the Kardashians in the news and all this stuff.
Right.
And these
Motley Crue.
And these were like the role models of these reflected the culture, these people.
Yeah.
And then, as you guys pointed out, that I didn't give much thought to, is like now in today's day and age, these role models are emerging. They're not even famous people or even remotely related to famous people. They're not. They were quite the opposite. They're normal people who have made themselves, they have pushed themselves up to this pedestal
Look
where they
at
can
me,
be role
look at
models.
me.
Look at me, look at me. And I think that reflects the culture in a lot of ways. It's a very narcissistic culture that the world should revolve around the individual, and you should believe what I tell you to believe. And if I say I'm a woman, you have to agree, even though I'm a man. And if you don't use my pronouns, then shame on you. That's a microaggression that's tantamount to violence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like these things reflect the culture. And when people are elevating themselves into that, it's a direct reflection of the culture, because who on earth thinks that they're that important?
Yeah.
Now, like you pointed out, Brett, it might have something to do with money. And what are we doing? We are pushing ourselves out there, and we're sort of doing the same thing. Now, it's not as gaudy or crass, obviously, and we're trying to be genuine about it. And we're not talking about Hawk Tuohy spitting on somebody's genitals. But, it's like we're doing it too. So the culture now is a grassroots news culture. So
I don't think any of us three, it's certainly not me, are holding ourselves out as heroes or idols, though.
Of course not,
Yeah.
right?
No. I mean,
No.
that would be the difference between what we're putting out.
But I'm not sure the Kardashians are either. I think they are just out there and they're enjoying their money and they're enjoying their fame. And you've got, like I said, they came out of that culture that in my head I'm thinking Britney Spears not wearing underwear, getting out of the limousine with Paris Hilton, and you got those. It's just like this. I remember looking at that gosh, this is so.
But I think Belinda's, when she used the word idol, I'm thinking idolatry. And I'm thinking of false gods. I'm thinking of people who...
Well, all these people are false gods.
That's
right?
what I'm saying.
All these people are.
And I think they are deliberately trying to be famous. And Paris Hilton's a great example. She's just like the Kardashians. She's not a singer. She's not an actress. She's just an heiress.
And she's not even... Look, even when I first saw her, it's like she didn't match like what was the hottest girl of the girls at that point. She's not... I mean, she's she's just a rich heiress. It's like you said.
Yeah.
But she puts herself out there. So then there's other people that become idols, like Clint Eastwood. He was just an actor in the movies, but he's sort of like, people still have his big life-size poster on the walls at the back of their door, in his movies, and the same with John Wayne, and the same with Elvis, and the same with, so those people sort of, maybe they came by a little bit more naturally, I suppose. But either way, they were idolized in their day. And I think all that does, I don't think it tells us anything as much as it shows us. It's a mirror for the culture.
I agree with you.
Or maybe it's a I cut you, but let me.
No, that's
or
okay.
Maybe
finish
it's
your thought, man.
Maybe it's a compass pointing in the direction of where the culture is going at times too.
Yeah.
I don't know what comes first.
I think our electronic culture. So if you go back, starting with, let's say, radio, then TV, then the internet, I think those new technologies, as they rolled out and continue now with AI, they continue to roll out. I mean, are we going to get at some point an AI hero who's not even a real person?
Like, how about Max Headroom?
Max Headroom came to my mind too.
Exactly. Yeah. Alexa.
Yeah.
People talk to this device.
Yeah.
I mean, I go into my son's.
Like it's their sister
Oh
in their
my
house
God! I
or
go in
something.
my son's house. Alexa, would you please turn on the soft lighting and the Hawaiian murals?
And they're encouraging you, when you type to AI, to speak to it as a person.
Yeah.
So it does what you want. So we're personalized. We're humanizing.
Yep.
This that has the potential. You're right.
And the other difference we have today is that the classic Hollywood, those like the Errol Flynns or, Marilyn Monroe or Gregory Peck or Jimmy Stewart or Henry Fonda or these sort of the people that built Hollywood in some respects.
Yeah.
They were also protected. The studios protected those people
because they all had major flaws.
Of course, they protected them from the
I shouldn't say flaws, but they were all
human.
He's that, she's that.
Well, some of them were gay, and they protected them from that. Some of them were Jewish, and they protected them from that. Some of them just had affairs with each other, and they protected them from that.
Right.
Bob Crane, notoriously. It's like all these guys, but they were protected, and now they're not. Now they're not. So the idols that were emerged out of Hollywood were portrayed as something they probably were not, in order to manipulate what people thought of them.
Yeah.
And now that protection is gone. And even the presidents were protected. It wasn't published, even though everybody knew Kennedy was sleeping with everybody and their mother. And it's like that he was protected from that. When Clinton did it, not so much.
Yeah.
And when Trump did it, not so much. Everything gets exposed. So that maybe that's why these people emerge, because it's now that everything's on Front Street anyway, and the idols aren't protected. It's, I guess, the natural progression is, well, he can do it, I can do it. So here we go.
I think in Hollywood that Rubicon got crossed in the Marlon Brando line when they asked him, well, what are you so in the movie? What are you so mad about? What are you rebelling against? And he leans back and he's got the cigarette and he goes, I don't know, man. What do you got?
That wasn't that. That was Jimmy's, or who died in the car
It was
crash.
Marlon Brando in the movie, where he's a motorcycle guy with a trophy and the handlebars.
Wild Boys.
Yeah, the Wild Ones.
I thought that was not Jimmy Stewart. Who's the guy who died in the car
You're thinking
crash?
of James
Dean.
James Dean.
Yeah, but Marlon Brando.
What are you rebelling against? What do you got? Right.
Yeah, he had the same answer. I don't know, man. What do you got?
Yep.
And it's like then the anti-heroes became the new idols. It was like,
and then what emerged from there? So the next generation, you've got the movie we talked about yesterday, Brett.
Lost it.
Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda.
Easy Rider.
Easy Rider.
Easy Rider.
It's like, so you had those guys sort of like these like, hey man, free love. Let's doing whatever we want. Let's party.
There's that party scene where they're all high.
Yeah, and they've stuffed their gas tanks full of drugs and money too.
But you know what we're describing here? We're not describing an idol of the real person. We're idolizing the person they portrayed.
The persona, right? The persona. That's a great point.
Because I love George Harrison, but guess what? I love George Harrison as Indiana Jones. Though I love Indiana Jones.
Harrison Ford.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I love the character Indiana Jones.
I like George Harrison.
But I like George Harrison too, of course. So,
But no, very interesting point. Very interesting point. So we're idolizing the Kardashians, and that's who they are, or at least that's who they're portraying themselves to be. Not in a movie, not a character, but a real person. So maybe that's been a big shift. So
because
now
they did reality TV. I mean, that was the whole idea.
Another good
the
point.
Osbournes.
Maybe these people came out of reality TV. The Fear Factor and
you just let it all hang out, man.
Yeah.
Right.
The Naked on the Island show, whatever the hell that was.
Yeah, with
what was
Survivor?
Survivor.
Yeah.
I
mean, which has been
Naked
20 seasons or something.
Yeah,
like
the
that.
reality TV that wasn't really reality, still manipulated, and these people became so. That sort of laid this path forward.
Well, I want to be in my little essay back to Belinda, which is people can read it on the website if they want, but I would like to talk a little bit about the pre-electronic heroes. So if you go back to the Roman Colosseum or Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan or the popes for the Roman Catholic Church, before there was any kind of electronic media, you were compelled to either tell stories, oral history, or whether it was hieroglyphics or whether it was a Bible. We were compelled to pass down knowledge in a written form only, where you didn't get, unless you were a handful of the people around Jesus or Alexander the Great or the great gladiators. The one gladiator had so much gold; he had more gold than Caesar himself. And they don't even know what happened.
Well, and not much different today.
Yeah, so
boxers.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So Belinda, we had, human beings have had these idols prior to, but now with the electronic media, anybody.
But
can
those
try
idols,
to
like
become an idol.
they capture our interest. They capture our imagination. They like idols traditionally provided us with some imaginatory understanding of what we could be, what's a hero like.
Right.
And so when the boxers would come around and fight, what it was, John L. Sullivan, or it's like those were the huge draws. The baseball players,
Muhammad Ali.
Later on, but this is before TV.
Yeah, before TV.
And then when radio came along, but the other thing that you brought
Jesse
up,
Owens at the Olympics.
Jesse Owens at the Olympics.
Other than the newsreels, right? There wasn't TV.
Court cases. People would go into the center of town and go into the courthouse. And that was when courthouses had balconies because they needed extra space for seating. That would be the entertainment. And so
the Scopes Monkey trial.
But the idols became the figures of what people wanted to be. And again, it goes back to my point. It reflected the culture.
It reflected the culture.
And now, to the extent that Kardashians are reflecting the culture, it's a scary place for our society.
The
Hak Tui girl has become so.
So I think our culture is very. We have a very surface level culture, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We don't really break down somebody's reputation or somebody's worth as an idol like we would have, say, back in the literature days.
Mm-hmm.
So I posited to Belinda in response, do you think somebody like Abraham Lincoln, just to pick out a historical figure, who was arguably not physically attractive, right, is said to have had a kind of a funny, squeaky voice, as did General Patton, by the way, another guy they said he had almost a feminine, very high-pitched voice. But you take somebody from the pre-electronic age, and you just wonder in today. So I think most Americans, probably 90%, would say Abraham Lincoln was a great man, flawed like any man, but a great man, and was a great president. And there he is up on Mount Rushmore, for God's sake. So I'm going to say if you accept that notion and say Abraham Lincoln was great, here in 2024, if Abraham Lincoln was running for president, I think because of his physical attributes, we are so shallow today that we would not accept him as a legitimate candidate.
But he's not the only type of idol, and he's a different type of idol than the Kardashians. So at the time of Abraham Lincoln, I'm sure there was somebody who was more of a pop culture idol that people were. It might have been a boxer, it might have been somebody like that. But and so in today's day and age, you've got the Kardashians, and then you've also got like we saw our political figures. But then it's not just the Kardashians. We have other people that we idolize, and maybe we idolize some people with a little bit of just interest. So why do I care what the Kardashians are doing today? I don't know, because it's like drinking Kool-Aid and reading a comic book instead of reading
escapism.
Dickinson.
Well, I'll throw you two more examples real quick. Yeah. So take William Howard Taft, take James Garfield, two very fat presidents. Mm-hmm. I mean, rotund.
Obese.
Right, obese. And this is not my favorite politician for policy reasons, but take Chris Christie today, right? Oh my God. All you hear from these comedians and pundits and whatever is not really about what Chris Christie thinks. It's not about his policy positions. There is this instant rejection of him because of what he looks like. Yeah. And they talk about it. Oh, he's fat. He can't control himself. And in a past age, our idols, our heroes, people
but you didn't see them either. So
that's my point.
Yeah, you didn't have to see them.
It was literature. You learned about their candidacy by reading a paper.
Well, and the classic, the turning point for that was the Kennedy-Nixon debate that was on public TV. Nixon was coming off the flu or something, and he was all sweaty and didn't look really good, sort of ashen, and it was black and white. But there's Kennedy, polished, very attractive guy.
Yeah,
he's like he just captured the youth.
And the polling reflected, and this is great for Belinda's question, the polling reflected that the TV viewers said Kennedy won that debate. The people who listened on radio
thought Nixon won.
Said Nixon won.
Yeah,
that
there you
debate.
go. Yeah. There you go.
I mean, it's almost...
Now, that could be skewed, too, because the people on radio may be a different demographic than the people watching on TV. But the point is that it's what we have seen and what we're exposed to now in the media is so much more ubiquitous than it ever was. So we would learn about somebody because they came and literally stood on a stump and talked to us at the town square before they went on to the next town in Indiana.
Well, there was also more humility in our culture. Well, our culture did not...
Seriousness.
Well, our culture also did not judge people based on physical attributes as much as...
I don't know that. You might be right.
As much as. So comparative.
You might be right.
I'm not saying we never did. I'm saying as much as we do now.
And I don't think... You very well may be right about that.
I mean, you mentioned Paris Hilton, right? And the immediate impression was, well, she's not the hot thing, right? Is what you said. And I think that's like people go to that now almost immediately. Well, they want to know what you look like.
And just
rather than what is the content of your character.
But the point of me bringing that up was that at the time the supermodels had a look, and Paris Hilton didn't really match that look. So I'm trying to come up with a reason why she would be idolized. Yeah. And it's not just by her looks. It's because she's a rich heiress who had sort of a flamboyant way about her.
Right.
And then these people were intentionally releasing sex videos. I mean, it's like that reflects the culture.
Yeah, Tommy Lee and the Baywatch lady.
That wasn't intentional, but
well, it was on his part, wasn't it?
No.
Oh, really?
No. Okay. Somebody, some contractor working in his house stole that from him,
like that,
and then sold it. There's actually a documentary. Well, if the documentary is true, it's a very interesting movie.
Yeah.
A true documentary, whatever.
Yeah.
But so anyway, I don't think we've answered Belinda's question totally, but we at least had a little bit of a discussion about it, and it's probably worthy of more thought as we go forward. But the only conclusion I could come to answer her question is that who we idolize reflects our culture. And then it begs the question, what comes first, the culture or the idol? And who is leading whom? Is that the right way to say it? Who's the leader? Is it the idol or is it the culture? Are these idols pulling us in some way that we're already inclined to go? Or are we just falling victim to, maybe a movement without real intent? We're just sort of meandering down the stream, so to speak, and we don't really know what we're doing, but that's interesting over there. I'll watch that for a while.
Mm-hmm. There has been a bit of a backlash to this worship of beauty. And I'll speak up for Les Wexner, where his company for a while experimented with putting out models that did not fit this archetype of perfection, right? They were a little older. Maybe they had some fat.
You're talking about the Abercrombie. When there was a big backlash with Abercrombie.
Well, and also with Mr. Wexner's, what's the...
Limited?
Yeah. Well, no,
Victoria's Secret.
Victoria's Secret.
Victoria's Secret.
Right.
Yeah.
So you
But I
didn't
think
have...
by then he might have sold it. But your point, I know what your point is. Yeah.
Well, you didn't have these people coming down the aisle with wings on that had, 36, 24, 36 perfect figures or whatever it was. Now you had older women, maybe a little overweight, maybe a little unattractive.
Maybe a man dressed like a woman.
Oh God, he didn't do that. But,
I don't know. I don't know if he did or not. I think that has happened.
Well, RuPaul. But at any rate, society has started, I think, to self-criticize along Belinda's point of what is beauty, what is to be idolized. And I think the pressure girls in particular have been under to be some kind of perfect specimen is ridiculous. I think a girl's human worth comes from the complete person, not what they look like. And I think society has started to recognize Belinda's point that we need to recalibrate who we really look up to and why we look up to them.
I don't think it's going to be intentional. I don't think you can. It is not an intentional choice. It is so people's interests maybe reflect who they look up to. So maybe you can do that at the educational level. So look, I play classical guitar. I think Julian Bream he was one of my idols. Like I think he was phenomenal. His musicianship and what he did for that instrument. And I would say 99% of the people listening to this would never even know who that man is. But it reflected an interest I have.
Well, look how twisted and how horribly disfigured Stephen Hawking was, right? And he's certainly one of my heroes, right? And it's because of the content of his mind was unbelievable. I mean, he disproved one of Einstein's theories.
So that reflects your interest, and your interest was influenced by your education, by and large. And if we are not educating our people, our children, on anything significant, whether it's the classics, whether it's the classic, like I was educated in a very traditional way, and I was educated at home in a very traditional way. I spent weekends watching old movies. Because that's what was on, and I found them fascinating. Still to this day, the black and white cinematography, it's art.
Yeah,
and we don't have that now. So my interests were influenced by my education and upbringing, perhaps.
Yeah, because a lot of the examples you brought up are just there's no substance.
Yeah,
correct.
There's just absolutely nothing.
Pop culture,
right?
It's pop culture,
and there's a place for it.
There is,
so for sure,
it just
but
can't
not to that idol level.
But maybe what's happened is pop culture has replaced other more legitimate idolization that was healthy in our society.
That's right.
It is tamped it out.
That's right.
And I think that started with a failure in education. So anyway, all right, Belinda, thank you very much.
Great
question.
Subject.
Please feel free to add some more. And those who are listening, now if you submit a cool enough question, we'll discuss it right here in a separate episode at Common Sense Ohio, where each and every week we are coming at you right from the middle.